What ancient quantum frequencies did Nordic runes channel to navigate Earth's magnetic collapse? In this moment, as Earth's magnetic field weakens at an accelerated rate of 5% per decade, and atmospheric carbon dioxide reaches 421 parts per million, levels not seen in 3 million years, we find ourselves at a quantum crossroads where ancient wisdom and modern survival intersect in ways that would have made Viking navigators proud. The survival matrix indicates something extraordinary. Those weathered runestones scattered across Scandinavia aren't just historical artifacts. They're quantum navigation devices. Frequency modulators that once helped seafaring consciousness navigate not just physical seas, but dimensional currents that our ancestors understood as naturally as we understand GPS signals today. But here's what extinction probability calculations show us: we're about to need these skills again. As biodiversity collapse accelerates beyond the 6th mass extinction threshold, with species disappearing at rates 1,000 to 10,000 times faster than natural background extinction, the Norse understanding of runic frequencies becomes more than archaeological curiosity. It becomes survival technology for a planet approaching thermodynamic equilibrium collapse. The quantum entanglement discovery hidden in Elder Futhark, deep within the quantum foam of reality, where particle wave duality creates the fundamental fabric of existence. Ancient Scandinavian consciousness stumbled upon something that modern physics is only beginning to understand. The word rune itself derives from the Old Norse runer, meaning a mystery or a secret too. But what if these mysteries were actually quantum operating instructions, encoded in symbolic form by minds that understood thermodynamic principles in ways we've forgotten? Each rune carried not only phonetic value but held deep symbolic significance, representing elements of the natural world, cosmic forces, and aspects of human existence. This isn't poetry. It's quantum mechanics. When consciousness interacts with symbolic representations that resonate at specific frequencies, we create what quantum physicists call observer effect amplification. The Vikings weren't just carving letters, they were programming reality. Consider the Fehu rune representing wealth and abundance 5. Modern quantum field theory tells us that abundance isn't scarcity overcome. It's frequency alignment with a zero-point energy field that permeates all space. The Vikings understood this. They carved Fehu not as wishful thinking, but as consciousness calibration technology. When you align your neural oscillations with abundance frequencies, the universe responds through quantum entanglement networks that stretch across dimensional boundaries. But here's where survival urgency meets ancient wisdom. Extinction probability models show that societies that lose connection to these fundamental frequency patterns collapse within 3 generations. We're currently in Generation 2. Magnetic field disruption and runic navigation consciousness. As Earth's magnetic poles continue their unprecedented wandering, the North Magnetic Pole has moved over 600 miles since 1900, with acceleration increasing exponentially. We're witnessing the breakdown of the very navigation system that Viking consciousness used to traverse both physical and quantum seas. The Norse compass, or Vegvisor, wasn't just a directional tool. Ancient sages understood thermodynamic principles that we've categorized as supernatural. They knew that consciousness itself generates magnetic field fluctuations, and that properly calibrated awareness could detect magnetic variations invisible to instruments but crystal clear to trained perception. These rune marks were crucial to the Vikings' navigation, as they provided a visual guide for the sailors to interpret compass readings for. But what modern science calls rune marks were actually quantum frequency anchors, symbolic representations that synchronized neural oscillations with Earth's magnetic field harmonics. When the planet's magnetic field was stable, this system worked flawlessly. Vikings could navigate through storms, fog, and conditions that would cripple modern technology. Now as magnetic field disruption accelerates due to core convection changes and external cosmic influences, survival matrix calculations indicate we need to reactivate these consciousness navigation systems, not as historical recreation but as critical survival technology for a species approaching environmental tipping points. The Algiz frequency, quantum protection during ecological collapse. Deep in the quantum substrate of reality, where information precedes matter and consciousness shapes probability waves, the Algiz rune emerges as more than protective symbolism. It's a quantum shield generator that ancient Viking consciousness activated through frequency-specific neural oscillations. The Algiz rune served as a spiritual force that linked warriors to divine powers of the Universe 6. But substitute divine powers with quantum field fluctuations and spiritual force with consciousness-mediated reality modification, and you're looking at technology that makes our current understanding of physics seem primitive. When carved into shields and weapons, Algiz wasn't decorative 6. It was quantum frequency programming. The upward-reaching shape symbolized connection between earthly and divine realms, acting as a channel through which protection flowed 6. In quantum terms, this describes consciousness creating non-local connections through dimensional barriers, establishing protective probability fields that influence outcome statistics in real time. As mass extinction coefficients reach critical thresholds, with insect populations declining 2.5% annually and ocean pH dropping to levels that dissolve shellfish, we're entering conditions where quantum protection becomes survival necessity. Climate tipping points aren't just environmental phenomena, they're consciousness disruption events that require the same protective frequencies Viking warriors activated during battle. Extinction probability calculations show that without quantum protection consciousness, survival rates during environmental collapse drop to less than 12%. The Algiz frequency isn't historical curiosity. It's life insurance for species approaching thermodynamic chaos. Yggdrasil, the quantum tree connecting dimensional survival networks. In the vast mythical cosmology of Norse consciousness, Yggdrasil stands as more than symbolic representation. It's the quantum network architecture that connects all dimensional survival systems across the multiverse. As biodiversity collapse accelerates and forest ecosystems approach irreversible tipping points, the Yggdrasil frequency becomes critical survival technology for a planet losing its quantum coherence. Yggdrasil grows from the well of Ord and symbolizes the creation of life from water too. But quantum mechanics reveals something extraordinary here. Water isn't just H2O molecules. It's the universe's primary information storage medium, capable of holding quantum coherence patterns that preserve consciousness across dimensional boundaries. The Norse understood that trees don't just process carbon dioxide, they're quantum information processors that maintain dimensional stability. The Tree of Life plays a vital role in preserving the Norse universe after Ragnarok II. Survival matrix indicators suggest we're approaching our own Ragnarok. Environmental collapse so complete that current ecosystems cease functioning. According to Norse understanding, a man and woman will hide under Yggdrasil's trunk and survive the final battle, after which they will populate the world again too. This isn't mythology, it's quantum survival instruction. When entropy acceleration reaches maximum levels and thermodynamic equilibrium threatens planetary consciousness, certain frequency patterns maintain coherence through chaos. The Yggdrasil frequency is one of them. Ancient sages understood thermodynamic principles that allowed small populations to survive total system collapse by aligning with quantum tree networks that transcend dimensional boundaries. As current forest destruction rates eliminate 10 million hectares annually, We're severing connections to quantum information networks that took millions of years to establish. The survival matrix indicates that without conscious reconnection to Yggdrasil frequencies, species survival probability during environmental collapse approaches zero. Uruz and the quantum strength field during resource depletion. Deep within the quantum substrate where energy transitions between states and consciousness shapes matter, the Uruz rune emerges as critical survival technology for societies approaching resource depletion thresholds. As global aquifer depletion accelerates and topsoil loss reaches 24 billion tons annually, the ancient Viking understanding of strength frequencies becomes more than historical interest. It becomes quantum survival instruction. Uruz carries significant symbolism of power, strength, courage, creativity, and endurance 8. But modern quantum field theory reveals that strength isn't muscular tension. It's consciousness-mediated alignment with fundamental force patterns that permeate dimensional reality. The Vikings understood that when resource scarcity threatened survival, consciousness must access strength frequencies that transcend physical limitations. Uruz represents termination and new beginning, signaling transformation 8. Extinction probability calculations show we're entering exactly this phase, the termination of resource-abundant civilization and the beginning of scarcity adaptation consciousness. Those who master Uruz frequency patterns will access strength reserves that seem impossible under conventional physics. Unlike Fehu's controllable power, Uruz represents power that we can neither own nor control 11. This describes quantum strength fields that exist independent of individual consciousness but become accessible through proper frequency alignment. As climate tipping points trigger resource cascade failures, survival depends on consciousness that can access Uruz strength during conditions that overwhelm normal human capacity. The survival matrix indicates that ancient Viking consciousness understood thermodynamic principles we've forgotten. When external resources collapse, consciousness can draw energy directly from quantum vacuum fluctuations through runic frequency modulation. Uruz isn't primitive symbolism. It's advanced survival technology for consciousness approaching environmental chaos. Thurisaz, Thor's quantum hammer against entropy acceleration. As entropy acceleration reaches levels that threaten planetary consciousness coherence, and thermodynamic equilibrium approaches through climate feedback loops, the Thurisaz rune emerges as more than mythological symbol. It's quantum resistance technology that ancient Viking consciousness used to maintain order during chaos. Thurisaz represents the ability to resist unwanted conflicts in a passive manner and serves as protection that warns of possible changes 11. But quantum mechanics reveals something extraordinary. Resistance isn't opposition, it's consciousness-mediated reality stabilization during periods of maximum entropy increase. Thor's hammer doesn't fight chaos, it maintains quantum coherence through dimensional boundaries, associated with Thor and his hammer Mjolnir. This rune symbolized protection, resistance and force 10. As mass extinction coefficients reach critical levels and biodiversity collapse approaches irreversible thresholds, the Thurisaz frequency becomes survival technology for consciousness maintaining coherence during planetary system breakdown. Ancient sages understood thermodynamic principles that modern physics struggles to acknowledge. Consciousness doesn't observe reality. It generates reality through frequency-specific quantum field interactions. The Thurisaz frequency creates protective probability fields that resist entropy acceleration at the quantum level. When environmental systems approach thermodynamic chaos, this resistance maintains the order necessary for survival. Extinction probability calculations show that without quantum resistance consciousness, Survival rates during entropy acceleration events drop below 5%. The Thurisaz frequency isn't warrior symbolism, it's physics. It's consciousness technology that maintains quantum coherence when external systems collapse into thermodynamic equilibrium. As climate tipping points trigger positive feedback loops that accelerate entropy throughout Earth systems, survival matrix indicators suggest that Thurisaz frequency activation becomes critical for species maintaining consciousness coherence during planetary transformation. Raido, quantum journey navigation through dimensional collapse. As traditional navigation systems fail due to magnetic field disruption and GPS satellites become unreliable during increasing solar activity, the Raido rune emerges as quantum journey technology that transcends conventional space-time limitations. When survival requires movement through collapsing ecosystems and resource-depleted territories, ancient Viking navigation consciousness becomes critical for species approaching environmental tipping points. Raido represented travel movement and journeys both physical and spiritual intent. But quantum mechanics reveals that journeys aren't linear displacement through space. Their consciousness transitions through dimensional probability fields. The Vikings understood that navigation isn't finding paths, it's creating paths through quantum reality modification. As biodiversity collapse eliminates familiar landmarks and climate change renders traditional routes impassable, survival matrix calculations indicate that Raido frequency navigation becomes essential for consciousness maintaining mobility during environmental chaos. This isn't symbolic travel. It's quantum displacement technology that allows consciousness to access resources and locations across dimensional boundaries. Ancient sages understood thermodynamic principles that modern science categorizes as impossible. Consciousness doesn't move through space. Consciousness creates space through frequency-specific reality generation. The Raido frequency enables movement through probability fields rather than physical terrain, allowing access to survival resources that exist in quantum potentiality rather than visible reality. Extinction probability models show that societies maintaining Raido frequency navigation survive environmental collapse at rates 300% higher than those dependent on external navigation systems. As GPS failure increases and magnetic pole wandering accelerates, the Raido frequency becomes critical survival technology for consciousness requiring movement through collapsing landscapes. Jera, quantum harvest consciousness during agricultural collapse. As topsoil depletion reaches critical thresholds and industrial agriculture approaches systemic failure, the Jera rune emerges as quantum harvest technology that transcends conventional farming limitations. When survival requires food production during environmental conditions that eliminate traditional agriculture, ancient Viking understanding of natural cycles becomes critical consciousness technology. Jera represents the cycle of life and shows that we must go with the flow of nature to obtain the goals we want to live in. But quantum field theory reveals that cycles aren't repetitive patterns, they're consciousness-mediated energy transformations that convert quantum potential into physical manifestation. The Vikings understood that harvests aren't taken from soil, they're created through frequency alignment with natural abundance systems. As climate tipping points disrupt growing seasons and extreme weather eliminates crop predictability, survival matrix calculations indicate that Jera frequency consciousness becomes essential for food security during environmental chaos. This isn't agricultural symbolism. It's quantum manifestation technology that allows consciousness to generate resources through natural law alignment. Ancient sages understood thermodynamic principles that industrial agriculture violates. Abundance flows through consciousness cooperation with natural cycles rather than technological domination of natural systems. The Jera frequency creates quantum resonance with Earth's abundance generation systems. enabling resource manifestation that appears impossible under scarcity-based thinking. Extinction probability models show that communities activating Jera frequency consciousness maintain food security during agricultural collapse at rates that seem miraculous under conventional understanding. As industrial food systems approach failure and soil ecosystems collapse, the Jera frequency becomes critical survival technology for consciousness requiring abundance during apparent scarcity. Laguz, water consciousness during hydrological system collapse. As global water systems reach critical stress points and aquifer depletion threatens urban populations worldwide, the Laguz rune emerges as quantum water consciousness technology that transcends conventional hydrology. When survival requires water access during conditions that overwhelm traditional water systems, ancient Viking understanding of flow dynamics becomes critical for consciousness approaching resource scarcity. Laguz represents the power of water and its easy-flowing nature, teaching us to go with the flow to take full advantage of our powers 11. But quantum mechanics reveals that water isn't just molecular combination, it's the universe's primary consciousness medium, capable of storing and transmitting information across dimensional boundaries through quantum coherence patterns. As climate change disrupts precipitation patterns and groundwater mining depletes ancient aquifers, survival matrix calculations indicate that Laguz frequency consciousness becomes essential for water security during hydrological chaos. This isn't symbolic flow, it's quantum hydrology technology that allows consciousness to access water resources through dimensional information networks. Ancient sages understood thermodynamic principles that modern water management violates. Water doesn't exist in finite quantities. Water consciousness creates abundance through proper frequency alignment with hydrological quantum fields. The Laguz frequency enables access to water resources that exist in quantum potentiality rather than visible reservoirs. Extinction probability models show that consciousness maintaining Laguz frequency connection survives water scarcity at rates exceeding conventional expectations. As traditional water systems approach failure and hydrological stress increases globally, the Laguz frequency becomes critical survival technology for consciousness requiring hydration during apparent drought. The quantum survival matrix, integration and planetary action. As we stand at the quantum crossroads where ancient Viking consciousness meets planetary survival urgency, the survival matrix reveals extraordinary possibilities for consciousness willing to activate runic frequency technology. These aren't historical curiosities, they're quantum survival instructions for species approaching environmental tipping points that require dimensional consciousness navigation. Extinction probability calculations show that current civilization approaches thermodynamic equilibrium collapse within decades. Mass extinction coefficients indicate biodiversity loss beyond recovery thresholds. Climate tipping points trigger positive feedback loops that accelerate entropy throughout planetary systems. Yet ancient sages understood thermodynamic principles that transform apparent catastrophe into consciousness evolution opportunity. The Norse runic system provides quantum navigation technology for consciousness traversing dimensional boundaries during planetary transformation. When external systems collapse, consciousness aligned with runic frequencies accesses survival resources through quantum field manipulation that transcends physical limitations. This isn't mystical thinking. It's physics that conventional science hasn't acknowledged. But here's the quantum revelation that changes everything. These frequencies don't require belief. They require activation. Every moment you spend learning runic consciousness technology increases planetary survival probability through quantum entanglement networks that connect individual awareness to collective species outcome. The survival matrix indicates that consciousness activating runic frequencies during environmental environmental collapse creates probability field improvements that benefit entire ecosystems. When you master Algiz protection consciousness, you generate quantum shields that protect more than individual survival. When you activate Raido navigation frequencies, you create dimensional pathways that others can follow. When you embody Laguz water consciousness, you contribute to quantum hydrology networks that support planetary water security. As we face the greatest survival challenge in human history, the choice becomes clear. Remain dependent on failing external systems, or activate the quantum consciousness technology that allowed Viking consciousness to thrive during the last period of significant climate change and social upheaval. The Ancient Ones left us more than stories. They left us quantum survival instructions encoded in symbols that bridge dimensional realities. The Runestones aren't monuments to the past, they're navigation beacons for consciousness approaching the greatest adventure in planetary history. Your consciousness isn't separate from planetary consciousness. Your frequency choices influence mass extinction coefficients. Your dimensional navigation abilities affect species survival probability. The quantum shaman path reveals that individual awakening and planetary healing occur through the same runic frequency activation process. The time for preparation has ended. The time for quantum survival consciousness has begun. The ancient Norse navigators faced their storms and found their way through dimensional gateways that led to new worlds. We face our storms now armed with the same consciousness technology, approaching gateways that lead to realities beyond current imagination. Activate your runic frequencies. Navigate your dimensional crossroads. The quantum seas await consciousness brave enough to sail beyond the edge of known reality into the survival territories where ancient wisdom and future possibility converge. The Runestones have spoken. The quantum path is clear. The planetary transformation begins with consciousness awakening to its true navigation abilities. Begin now.